Hey everyone, welcome to Fighting Over the Card Catalog, a snarky look back on young adult novels of the 80s and 90s. I'm Jess.
And I'm Steven, and I'm here to make my wife happy.
We're taking a journey to find out how many terrible and hopefully some not so terrible books from my youth, or Steven's youth, he can get me to read before I reconsider this whole marriage. Hi.
Hey, babe.
Happy second week of your birthday.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And happy Disney Plus Day. Why I didn't connect that we'd have to be recording tonight on Disney Plus Day.
Right.
Oh, so mad. I've already watched Brave and an episode of the original Mickey Mouse Club.
Oh.
The very first episode.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to watching the Mandalorian.
Mandalorian? Oh, I thought it was Ian. I'm not sure.
Mandalorian.
I don't know. What is it?
One of those.
I think it's Mandalorian. And Encore. I'm psyched for Encore.
Yeah.
But yeah, this week we read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, published in 1979. And it's a longer book, so let's get right into it.
Yeah.
Tell us.
Seconds before the Earth is demolished to make way for a galactic freeway, Arthur Dent is plucked off the planet by his friend Ford Prefect, a researcher for the revised edition of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, who, for the last 15 years, has been posing as an out-of-work actor. Together, this dynamic pair begin a journey through space, aided by quotes from the Hitchhiker's Guide. A towel is about the most massively useful thing an interstellar hiker can have. And a galaxy full of fellow travelers, Zaphod Beeblebrox, the two-headed, three-armed ex-hippie, and totally out-to-lunch president of the galaxy, Trillian, Zaphod's girlfriend, formerly Tricia McMillan, whom Arthur tried to pick up at a cocktail party once upon a time, Zone, Marvin, a paranoid, brilliant, and chronically depressed robot, Veet Vujagig, a former graduate student who is obsessed with the disappearance of all the ballpoint pens he bought over the years. Where are these pens? Why are we born? Why do we die? Why do we spend so much time in between wearing digital watches? For all the answers, stick your thumbs up to the stars and don't forget to bring a towel.
Okay, so Pete Buttigieg is not in this book.
No, it's Veet Vujagig. But that is so funny how close that is.
It is very funny. Especially with what we're going to get into later.
I'm very disappointed with how they introduced Trillian on this book.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Trillian, Zaphod's girlfriend.
Oh, yes.
Who
yes.
Another main character hit on at a party. And happens to be the smartest character and most together character in the entire book.
Yeah, but I mean, that doesn't sell books. My God. Get out of here with that feminist bullshit.
So I read this when I was probably around 12 or 13.
Uh-huh.
And at the time, I would have to say it was... did we do that at the beginning?
Yeah. Your history with it?
Ranking?
Yes.
Yes. Or
I mean, you can go ahead and do it.
When do we usually do it?
At the end of our first impressions before we get into the synopsis. So
okay.
You can go ahead and do it.
All right. So, yeah, at the time, I would probably say this was like a 2. One of the best books I'd ever read. Now I have to give it a 3 to 4.
Really?
Yeah, I think my impressions are heavily influenced by the shitty movie.
Oh no!
Yes, and I kept thinking as I'm re-listening to this, how bad the movie was, how bad they got things wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, they give physical descriptions of characters. You can just picture these characters in your mind as you hear them speaking, and they totally miscast the movie. The two-headed. Okay, so it talks about the two-headed president, right?
Right.
Zaphod. And at one point, it starts talking about eyes rolling from one head to the other, and then the head on the right. It physically described that, but in the movie, they did some weird thing where one head was hidden and your head his head flipped up.
Right. It's been forever since I've seen the movie. So.
I mean, just there was so many things that were done badly, and it's so sad because Douglas Adams had tried to get that movie made for years and years and years.
Right.
Since it was a bestseller, basically, he had been trying to get that made into a movie, and they were making it as he was dying. Mm-hmm. And my hope is that he did not see a final cut of that movie.
I don't think so. I think he died too early for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. Sorry, Douglas.
Sorry, Douglas.
That they did you so wrong. But the book itself is still good. And it mostly holds up still. They have these, there was at one point they called the Hitchhikers, like an electronic book.
Oh, yes. I love that so much.
But then they have there's no concept of the internet.
Right.
Because this is way before the internet.
Right.
And so that was not even basically the Hitchhiker's Guide is like a miniature internet, I guess, or encyclopedia, so. Really. Encyclopedia, a galactic encyclopedia.
Like a Kindle version of Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Galactic.
Right.
Wiki. Yeah.
But other than that, he talks about digital watches quite a bit.
Yeah.
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 Not quite a thing anymore, but.
Well, Fitbits are.
And.
I mean, he didn't exactly
cell phones.
Understand that. Yeah. Yeah.
Those are not really in there. Anyway.
But yeah. It's interesting how much he did kind of predict things. Or, yeah, we'll get into that. Yeah, so I read this in probably 2004 or 5, before the movie came out. But not far.
Thankfully.
Yeah, not far before. And then I've only seen the movie once, so I really don't remember much about it.
Thankfully.
I was just looking up to see if it's streaming anywhere free. It's not. You can get it on Vudu for $3. Mm-hmm.
Don't
won't.
Do it.
It's not worth it. No. So I think it's fun,
mm-hmm.
but it's way too much constant goofiness, wackiness for me to really enjoy.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was one thing I was thinking. It's this isn't as fun as when I was younger and hearing where it was constantly making puns of stuff, I guess, kind of.
Right. And so irreverent, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it's just
reminds
constant.
me of a Terry Pratchett type book, or there was something else I was thinking it reminded me of, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. So yeah, we'll move along.
Good pull. So yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds me of. Not so much, not in a trying too hard way, but kind of like Deadpool 2, how I feel about it.
Okay.
But this is genuinely more funny than that.
Yeah.
It's not trying too hard, but it's just he's run right after another. Yeah.
He's trying to get in, at least every chapter, several different little...
just buck wild.
Yeah.
Silly,
Whereas Deadpool was every single sentence he was trying to.
Well, you laugh
snarky.
Already. Yeah. Anyway, so I probably give it a 5 or 6 because I think on my scale, anything higher than a 5 is if I wouldn't reread it again.
Okay.
I don't think I'll reread this one again. No.
No.
Does that mean I won't read the others in the series? Not necessarily. I've never read those. Have you read the entire series?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that was one of those things where it was okay, so I read, I think the first 3 were out when I read them, and then he started and then he started actually publishing others. And it was originally a trilogy. He called it a trilogy. And then, later on, I think he actually named one of his, or maybe he just put it as a subtitle, the increasingly wrongfully named trilogy or something like
nice.
that.
Yeah. I didn't put that together that they would have still been coming out
Yeah.
when you were reading. That's exciting. Okay. All right. So we ready to get into it?
Yep.
We start with Arthur Dent waking up one morning to find workmen basically attempting to bulldoze his house to make way for a new motorway. But his brain's not quite working yet correctly because he was like hella drinking the night before. Like he sees a bulldozer outside his house and he's just like kind of like, huh, yeah, that's the yellow thing. And he remembers last night that he was like going on about something super passionately, and then he's like, oh shit, and he runs outside to lie down in front of the bulldozer. He's like trying to stop them. They're like explaining, hey, the plans for this new road have been displayed for like several months, and so you should have said something a long time ago. And Arthur's like, they were actually like displayed in a locked filing cabinet in a disused bathroom in a planning office cellar.
Right.
What are you going to say?
Yeah, that it was like increasingly like, well, the plans have been available. Well, I just heard about this and well, they're available. And well, I went down there. Yeah, they're there in the display room.
Yeah,
the display room was in the basement.
Yeah.
But it was, that's where the display room is. Yeah, I found it in a locked filing cabinet.
Yeah. Oh, with
and kept going on and on.
Something labeled weird or a picture or something. I didn't write that bit down. But anyways, yeah. So they did everything legally, technically.
Right.
So, yeah, that sounds pretty typical small town bullshit. Then his friend Ford Prefect arrives, and he's like, what are you doing, my dude? I need you to come have a drink with me at the pub. And he's like looking up nervously at the sky and everything. Arthur believes he's an unemployed actor. But yeah, Ford's actually an alien who's been stranded on Earth for 15 years doing research for the travel guide, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Yeah, he's got a satchel with a device in it and a towel and a few scripts. But he's also got the sub-ether-sensomatic, which is detecting these aliens coming to destroy the Earth, basically. So yeah, and it's also got a towel in there because the Hitchhiker's Guide says that the towel is perfect for their multiple uses, and if you have a towel on you, you're assumed to have everything else you need too.
So anything that you need to borrow is just because you've accidentally lost that one item. If you can keep up with your towel, then surely you're a
right. I've been prepared.
Yeah.
Obviously.
And there's another encyclopedia book that's competing with it.
All right.
But this one outsells it because it has "Don't Panic" on the front cover.
Right. So at the pub, Ford tells Arthur that the Earth is about to be destroyed, which is confirmed when, this race of aliens called the Vogons arrive in their yellow spaceships and announce that they're going to demolish Earth to make way for a galactic bypass. They explain that the plans have been available for 50 years in the planning office on Alpha Centauri. Century?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then proceed to demolish the Earth. It's fine.
Yeah, which of course is playing off the
right
from the smaller scale to the bigger scale. That was
right.
Kind of fun.
Because there's bullshit everywhere. There's bureaucratic bullshit everywhere. Speaking of which, elsewhere in the galaxy, we have a two-headed alien, three-armed alien named, is it Zaphod? Zaphod. Okay. Beetlebrox. And he steals this super powerful new spaceship called the Heart of Gold. And he escapes with it. With Trillian, this girl he met at a party on Earth. Okay, let's get into it. So Douglas Adams predicted Trump, yes? Yes.
Well, I would say he accurately talked about politics.
Right.
And had a...
But this is so fucking spot on.
when I heard this again, I was like, oh my God, I got to tell Jess to write this down. And of course she already had.
Yes, I've got lots of things. Okay. So he's saying things like, all right. He had first decided to run for the presidency, a decision that has sent shockwaves of astonishment through the Imperial galaxy. Zaphod Beetlebrox? President? Not the Zaphod Beetlebrox. Not the president. Many had seen it as clinching proof that the whole of known creation had finally gone bananas. Only 6 people in the galaxy knew that the job of the galactic president was not to wield power, but to attract attention away from it. Zaphod Beetlebrox was amazingly good at his job. Okay, even this bit, he's wearing an orange sash. What? And he says things like, that is really amazing, he said. That is really, truly amazing. That is so amazingly amazing, I think I'd like to steal it. A marvelous presidential quote, absolutely true to form. I've got more quotes later on.
Okay, so there was another quote that I, as I was a libertarian, I would often quote, or say this one or put it on Facebook or something. It's from So Long and Thanks for All the Fish.
Oh, okay.
And it's, the people hate the lizards and the lizards rule the people. Odd, said Arthur. I thought you said it was a democracy. I did, said Ford. It is. So, said Arthur, hoping he wasn't sounding ridiculously obtuse, why don't people get rid of the lizards? It honestly doesn't occur to them, said Ford. They've all got to vote. They've all got the vote. So they all pretty much assume that the government they voted in more or less approximates to the government they want. You mean they actually vote for the lizards? Oh, yes, said Ford with a shrug, of course. But, said Arthur, going for the big one again, why? Because if they didn't vote for the lizard, said Ford, the wrong lizard might get in.
Mm-hmm. Like a woman lizard. So the first time I read this, it was during Bush II's presidency. Not sure if it was first or second term. It doesn't matter. It was after the war, or the war started.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it made sense then too.
Right.
Just not as such as a large a scale, but with, Bush being the figurehead and distracting us from Cheney doing all the shit stuff with his stupidity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, it made sense then in that way. And I was like, yeah. But now, unbelievable. And yeah, I've got some more instances later on. So, just before Earth is destroyed, Ford manages to save himself and Arthur by hitching a lift, because he's a hitchhiker, on a Vogon ship. And Ford explains, we have to hide because Vogons really hate hitchhikers, but the Vogons find them. And they torture them by reciting terrible poetry before they eject them into space. And we get a chapter from the Hitchhiker's Guide here that says a creature can survive for only 30 seconds if it takes a lungful of air once it's out in space. And the chances of being picked up by another ship within the 30 seconds are 2 to the power of 276,709 to 1 against. And interestingly enough, that number is also the phone number of a girl Arthur liked at a party before she went off with another guy. But 29 seconds after they're launched into space, Ford and Arthur are saved by Zaphod, who suddenly appears in the heart of gold because the ship runs on an infinite improbability drive, which makes the most improbable events imaginable occur, meaning, in this case, saving Arthur and Ford.
So you skipped a little bit there.
Yeah, I know. It's a really long book.
Yeah, I understand why. Just to explain, though, they were on the ship. They got caught. They were read poetry, too, and then they were kicked off.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. One of the things he said was about the worst poetry.
Mm-hmm.
The Volgons had the third worst, and then there was a second worst, and the first worst was a human, and actually gave the person's name and where they lived, and I wondered if that was somebody he knew in actual life.
Oh, nuh-uh.
Yeah, I don't know.
Did you not look it up? Okay,
No,
we'll have to. The improbability drive is a way to cross interstellar distances in a nothing of a second. And it was discovered by lucky chance, which annoyed respectable physicists. The inventor was a student sweeping up a lab after a party who thought that he only had to figure out how improbable it was, feed the figure into the finite improbability generator, give it a cup of tea, and turn it on. And this worked, but the respectable physicists were so mad that they fucking lynched him after he won an award. Because one thing they decided they couldn't stand was a smartass, which is not fair. No. Not to lynch somebody. So traveling with Zaphod are Trillian, who Arthur recognizes as the woman he spent hours trying to talk to at the party where Zaphod met her. And also Marvin, a depressed robot that Zaphod refers to as the paranoid android. Marvin makes me sad.
So there was actually a company that made like robots and actually the ship personality, and they gave actual human characteristics to these, and the robot happened to get the characteristic where he was very depressed.
And it's indeed very depressing. Yeah. So yeah, the guys are in this room and they turn around to see Marvin, and who begins to complain about the cheeriness of the doors in this place, which they do sound pretty annoying. I'll be honest. I mean,
yeah, the ship has a very positive attitude.
It's terribly annoying. And Marvin tells him how he's a genius, but he's been given tasks like moving them to the bridge and nothing else. But I mean, yeah, dog, I'd be upset too. Anyways, so they follow him to the bridge, and Ford's like, hey, who owns this ship? And Marvin doesn't say anything. And then he snaps that Zaphod Beetlebox has stolen it, and Ford's face is like, oh shit. While they're on their way there, Trillian and Zaphod are listening to the radio to hear news, if there's any news about him stealing the ship. And this is where we get more evidence for the Trump theory. I mean, she goes, you hear enough about yourself as it is. And he goes, I'm very insecure. We know that. And if there's anything more important than my ego around, I want it caught and shot now. And one of the major difficulties Trillian experienced in her relationship with Zaphod was learning to distinguish between him pretending to be stupid just to get people off their guard, pretending to be stupid because he couldn't be bothered to think and wanted someone else to do it for him, pretending to be outrageously stupid to hide the fact that he actually didn't understand what was going on, and really being genuinely stupid. If that is not our current president, spot on, my God. Great job, Douglas. Great job.
It was a tremendous job.
Hugely tremendous. The most perfect tremendous job. Trillian's like, hey, did you know that this is exactly the same place you picked me up in? And he's like, huh, that sure is buck wild, but She calls out to the computer and answers in this horribly cheerful voice, and Zaphod hates his computer. He tells it to shut up, and he and Trillian compute these figures themselves, and it still isn't clear why, but when they bring up the computer back online, it happily mentions telephone numbers, and Trillian's like, oh shit, let me get a look at these dudes. And she pulls the guys up on these monitor cameras, and they're like, hey, sup? And Ford tells Arthur that Zaphod's his semi cousin, and tells Zaphod that Arthur's his friend who I saved when the planet blew up. And Arthur's like, holy shit, I've met Zaphod, or should he say Phil, before. And he reminds him of this party, and Zaphod finally remembers, and he's like, ha. And Arthur explains that Zaphod came to this party and he looked normal, meaning only one head and two arms, and he picked up a beautiful and intelligent girl that Arthur was interested in by using a line about being from another planet.
he was like talked to him, and he said he was finally making headway, and then this guy came over and said, "Is this guy boring you? You should come with me. I'm from another planet."
It's a dick move, which sounds like our.
And then, of course, at this point,
This guy boring you? I've got a shit ton of money.
Trillian says, "Well, I mean, he was from another planet."
Mm-hmm. he was not lying. And he's like, and yeah, when Trillian says that, Arthur is just like, fucking son. And he's like, Trisha McMillan, what are you doing here? And she's like, I hitched a lift, just like you guys. So none of them can sleep that night except for Arthur. Trillian's thinking about her surprisingly negative reaction to her planet being destroyed. As she's sitting next to these two white mice that she brought in a cage with her. Zaphod thinks about not being all together there mentally and how these arrivals have made that feeling worse. And Ford wonders about his semi-cousin's ascent to power. Trillian wakes up Zaphod and takes him into the control room. And Ford joins them, and Trillian's pointing out how there's a planet at the exact set of coordinates Zaphod predicted. And Zaphod calls for the computer to show the Horsehead Nebula, which ought to have nothing in it. But he orders it to rotate its angle a little bit, and suddenly they see this red star, size of a small planet, and then another. And I don't really know what this means. It's a binary system.
Oh, it has two suns.
All right. Because Zaphod's like, I found it, the most improbable planet that ever existed. It's, okay, help me with the pronunciation of this one. Margrathea?
Margrathea.
Margrathea. Yeah. Okay, did not guess that one at all. Okay. It's this legendary planet that supposedly once housed this race of people who designed planets for the ultra rich. But Ford and Zaphod are arguing about this when Arthur comes in. Ford's like really skeptical that Margrathea. He's like, it never existed. And the computer tells him that they're near it. And Trillian's like, regardless of what y'all think, we're close to somewhere. So Zaphod calls out for more views of the planet, and they see this binary sunrise. And Zaphod gets like really excited. It's like, we're watching these twin suns. And Ford scoffs, but he is impressed at this new planet, whatever it is. But the fact that Zaphod thinks this is Margrathea is just stupid to him. And Arthur's all like, what the fuck is happening? And Trillian explains, and then he asks for tea. So the planet unfolds beneath them, and it doesn't sound beautiful. It's like gray, dusty, and dimly contoured, and like cold and dead as a crypt. Zaphod's like, we've got to explore, partly because he's curious, and partly for fame and money and adventure. And Ford's like, ugh. Even if it is the famous planet, there's definitely no treasure. But the narrator cuts in and explains that yes, this really is Margrathea. Margrathea. God damn it. Which is about to launch this deadly missile attack as part of an automatic defense system. It'll only bring about a few broken coffee cups, a broken mouse cage, a bruise to someone's upper arm, and the creation and demise of a sperm whale. So they're getting close to the planet, and they hear messages saying that the planet is no longer open for business and telling them to turn back. Of course they don't, and so two missiles start targeting the ship. They do some evasive maneuvers until Arthur activates the improbability drive, and this turns one missile into a surprise sperm whale and the other into a bowl of petunias, both of which drop towards the planet's surface. I really fucking hated this part.
Yeah.
It's terrible because the whale, it experiences consciousness for like only a few moments when it's plummeted to the planet and splattered in a messy, unfortunate death. So, like, it tells you this poor whale's thoughts. It's like, hey, what's going on? What is this? And it's like, oh, God, it's the whole confused animal thing. Oh, no, I can't handle it. Oh, I mean, thank God it wasn't very long, but it was still very upsetting.
And then the petunias had a last thought.
Did they?
Yeah. Said, not again.
Oh, yeah. So the poor petunias. So this does allow the spaceship to land safely. And when they get out, Trillian's like, oh no, my mice have escaped. But Zaphod totally doesn't care. But he should. Dun, dun, dun. So Zaphod seems disappointed, and Ford is super irritated that he was stranded for 15 fucking years on Earth, and now he's here. But Arthur is excited to be standing on another planet for the first time. Sure. But Trillian's a bit unnerved because she thought she saw something out of the corner of her eye. It appears deserted, but the impact of the whale dropping, that poor whale, it didn't even get a name. We should give it a name. The impact of it cracked open the planet's crust, exposing some subterranean tunnels, which Trillian and Ford and Zaphod go down to explore, while Arthur and Marvin remain behind to, like, guard the entrance. Even though they're like, you said no one was here. Right. It's like, well, just in case. And
we just don't want you with us.
Basically. So they're exploring, and Ford asks Zaphod to explain just how you found this planet in the first place. And he says, research, government archives, detective work, a few lucky guesses. Easy. And Ford figures out that he must have stolen the Heart of Gold for this purpose. But all Zaphod will say is that he stole the ship for many reasons. But he doesn't quite know what he's looking for. And Ford is very confused, and Zaphod's like, yeah, I might be crazy, but this is the way my mind works, and I've got to go with it. Because, like, every time he does something just like freewheeling, gets an idea, it ends up working out just fine. He does worry about himself sometimes. Once he decided to figure out how his mind works by plugging himself into the encephalographic, screen. Yeah? Encephalographic. Yeah?
Yeah.
Sounds good. He said it said that he had no anomalies. And he's clever and imaginative and extroverted and untrustworthy. All those obvious things. But then he saw that someone had cauterized all the signs. Synapses, thank you. And electronically traumatized those 2 lumps of cerebellum for some reason. So basically someone had been operating on his brain and had burned the initials ZB into his brain tissue as a clue. At that moment, however, a door slams behind them, sealing them in a chamber that starts filling up with gas.
And there are multiple people throughout this series who have the initial ZB.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not just Zaphod.
Okay. Yeah, because it's never brought up again in this book.
No, not really.
No. Hey, if you've been enjoying our show, please share it, tweet it, tell your friends and enemies. Word of mouth is the best way for podcasts to grow, and we would just really appreciate it. I know if you're listening, you probably have some bookworm friends from back in the day who would love to reminisce with us. Please consider rating us on Apple Podcasts and subscribing there, or at any of your favorite podcast places of choice. Come hang out with us on Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, YouTube, Pinterest, all at Fighting Over the Card Catalog, and on Twitter at Card Catalog Pod, and me, personally, at Jess Digress. And last but not least, check out our website where you can find all the things I just mentioned. Out on the surface, Arthur meets this old dude. Okay, tell me if I say this wrong. Slarty Bartfast? Slarty Bartfast. Okay.
Is that all one word?
Yeah.
Okay.
It basically sounds like Gandalf looking. He's an old man from motherfucker. Margrathea. He tells Arthur that the planet and the people aren't dead. They've just been asleep. Because the computers that were index linked to the galactic stock market prices. And so we'd all be revived when everybody else had rebuilt the economy enough to afford our rather expensive services. After the galaxy basically went into... Oh, motherfucker, what's the name for it? Recession. Thank you. So Arthur's like, holy shit. And he's like, well, are you back in the business of making planets then? He's like, no, of course not. But we have one client left with an extraordinary commission. And Arthur shares where the man is pointing, and it takes him a minute to realize that he's looking at Earth Mark II. Which, I mean, I don't really know what Mark means in that. But, I mean, I got it from context. That it's like Earth Part 2.
Right.
But what does Mark mean exactly?
Yeah, I don't know. I'll look it up for you.
Okay. Anyways, they're rebuilding Earth from the original blueprints. Arthur's like super shocked. He's like, did you guys build the Earth? And Slarda Bartfast says, yep. And he's like real upset to hear about its destruction, particularly Norway, because that was one of his. And he sounds like Michael, the architect from The Good Place, when he's saying all that. So he's no longer Gandalf in my mind. At this point, he is Ted Danson dressed up as Gandalf. And it's very good. So he adds that the mice were particularly upset as they had paid for it. And Arthur's brain can barely handle any of this. But Slarda Bartfast says rather bluntly that the mice commissioned and paid for and ran planet Earth. In fact, they were experimenting on men. And Arthur's like, no. It was the other way around, my dude. Humans experimented on the mice. And Slarda Bartfast shakes his head in admiration of the mice's disguise of their real natures and just how they are clever, hyper-intelligent, pan-dimensional beings. And he tells Arthur, I'll tell you the whole story if you have time. And he's like, well, time isn't one of my current problems. And so Slarda Bartfast, tells him how mice were the smartest species on Earth, with dolphins being the second. They fucked off before the Vogons arrived, and their last message being, so long, and thanks for all the fish. And he explains that long ago, a race of highly intelligent beings created this supercomputer to calculate the meaning of life. So these brilliant, pan-dimensional beings decided that they just had to know the meaning of life. So they built this supercomputer the size of a small city. And on the day of the great on-turning, these two programmers arrived and they switched on the machine, and this voice asked what the great task for which it was built, it was called into existence. And after a few moments, the computer known as Deep Thought, one of the other computers that Deep Thought was totally bashing, was called the Googleplex Star Thinker in the 7th Galaxy of Light and Ingenuity.
Okay.
But Google, it's not where Google got its name at all. So they were going to spell it Google, Googol, which is the number 1 followed by 100 zeros. That was picked to signify that the search engine was intended to provide large quantities of information. But it was misspelled accidentally to Google. And so then that's what they just ended up calling it. So it was a complete accident. Yeah.
Misspelled on what?
I forget exactly.
Like the corporate documents or something?
I forget exactly. But yeah, so I was Googling the origin of the name, and Hitchhiker's Guide together.
So Googleplex is what they call their
building.
Their building.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah. Googling them.
Googleplex. Okay, I gotcha.
Googling them together, the book and Google origin. I still couldn't find a connection. It was just mentioned everywhere in a bunch of places that. Wait, just
is it spelled Googleplex or Googleplex?
No, it's Google. Google.
Weird.
Yeah.
Because a Googleplex is the large number.
Right. That's what they were going to name it after. If you're going to talk, you've got to get closer to
Sorry.
So he just came up with Google. And there's no evidence of any connection of the Google guys getting the name from the book. These two programmers finally said that they want the answer, capitalized. That is the answer to life, the universe, and everything. And the computer's like, yeah, I can do that. But all of a sudden, these two dudes called the philosophers bust in. And they're like, they don't want the computer to give an answer because then they would be out of a job. They wanted to keep the vagueness and ill-defined borders. Deep thoughts like, okay, hey, it's going to take me 7 million years to figure out the answer. And so you guys can enjoy your time figuring it out yourselves. So the men were like, yeah, dope. That's fine. So after 7.5 million years of calculations, the computer informed them that the answer was 42, but did not know exactly what the question was.
That is the answer to the life, the universe, and everything.
Yep. Which brings me to, I'm glad we did this right now, since Bestie's Jessica's next birthday is her 42nd, and had already decided years ago that it's going to be a Hitchhiker's Guide party. Yeah. So I was able to research and get ideas. Right. The computer then designed another computer to find out what the question was. And the result was Earth, which was operated by white mice. And everything else, including humans, were simply components of the computer.
And it was destroyed 5 minutes before the answer.
Right. So, oh my God, how do you say it?
Margrathea.
Margratheans now had to build a new Earth, right, because the old one got destroyed.
And a mark is just another version. And it's used in a lot of military stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it makes me wonder if it was just this is 1, this is 2, mark.
Oh, doesn't that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
1 line, second line.
Right.
This is the second version.
Like when you're tallying up.
Yeah.
Tally marks. Anyways, back in the room, Ford and Trillian try to wake up Zaphod, but because he has 2 windpipes, he got a double dose of that gas, so it takes a little while. Other planet prototypes appear in their vision, and an advertisement for Margrathea, proclaims that they have ones to cater to anybody's taste. So the 3 are sitting there, and Zaphod talks about what he was saying before they passed out, and he's like, I know what happened to my minds must have been done so that he couldn't know himself, and so the government screening test couldn't pick it up, and it must be some sort of profound secret. And he explains that he had decided to run for president after the death of Euden Brandt, a man who both young Zaphod and Ford knew and liked a lot. But Brandt came to Zaphod before he died and told him he ought to steal the heart of gold, and the only time to do that would be during the launching ceremony. So he really only became president so he could steal the ship, but he doesn't know why. And so the the planet catalog images are fading away, and all of a sudden they're sitting in a waiting room, and this guy from the planet announces that the mice will see them now. Margrathean dude announces that the mice will see them now.
That's going to have to be our first pin. It's pronounced Margrathea.
Margrathean. So back in Gandalf Ted Danson dude's office.
It'll just be one planet pooping out another planet.
Do you think that's how it happens?
I mean...
It just poops it out?
Yeah, it has to be. That's the only explanation. It's obvious. Obviously the only thing.
It's either ghosts or being shat out.
Yeah.
Yes? All right. Gandalf Ted Danson tells Arthur that the Vogons destroyed 10 million years of work and planning in just an instant. And he had been working on the new Earth Mark II, but he had been assigned Africa this time, and he is more of an expert in fjords because of Norway. So he's a little bummed. Anyways, this light flashes and see Gandalf Ted Danson. Says, come on, we're going to meet the mice. And he adds that this is the third most improbable event in the history of the universe. And Arthur's like, what are the other two? And Gandalf Ted Danson, he just kind of shrugs and says, probably just coincidences. Mm-hmm. Arthur notices his dirty clothes, though, and he mutters, I seem to be having tremendous difficulty with my lifestyle. As he makes that comment, a freak wormhole opens in the fabric of the space-time continuum. And his words go way back in time to a dispute between two groups of strange and warlike beings, and the words are mistranslated as an insult. And this war ensues for centuries. And once the truth of the words becomes clear to them, they're like, oh shit. So Earth made us do this? So they rampage across space, preparing to attack Earth. However, the whole fleet is swallowed by a small dog. They'd miscalculated their proportions. Huh. So Arthur enters this waiting room where his friends are, and they're stuffing their faces with food, and this teeny tiny voice welcomes the Earthman. And Arthur's like, holy shit, there are mice on the table. And everybody else is like real awkward. He's like, and Trillian's like, hey, this is Benji and Frankie, our hosts, and the mice I brought from Earth. Gandalf Ted Danson is like, hey, y'all. And the mice are like, you're dismissed. And throw out that they no longer need the new Earth, which distresses Gandalf Ted Danson quite a bit because he'd been working so hard on it. Mm-hmm. He really got the shaft in this. So he leaves, and the mice explain that they're just like real tired of seeking the question and spent far too long doing so. But Margrathea is the portal back to their home. And they're like, we need to bring something with us, something that sounds good. And Ford and Zaphod are like, hey, Arthur might have some answers because his brain was an organic part of the penultimate configuration of the computer program.
And was there 5 minutes before the answer.
Earth was destroyed.
Before the answer.
Right. But Arthur's kind of doubtful, but the mice are really excited. And they're like, dope. We're ready to buy your brain. It'll have to be extracted. But we can put in a replacement electronic brain. And yeah, Arthur's understandably pretty horrified by this. And Ford and Zaphod, I was impressed. Zaphod was like, this is not part of the agreement, my dudes. Yeah.
But at first he said he wouldn't need to be a very big computer. All you need to do is
okay.
Say what?
He's a little snarky about it, but yes. The mice are in like these little glass, well, they said it was like Scotch whiskey glasses or something. Yeah. So they're able to like fling those towards Arthur, and Trillian tries to grab Arthur, and Zaphod and Ford are trying to open the door. And things aren't looking good, but then suddenly every alarm on the planet sounds, and it warns of a hostile ship on the planet. And Arthur and everyone else are able to run away while the mice are super mad at the fuss made over Arthur's brain. And they're like, well, we'll just have to make up a question then. It's like, whatever. They peace out.
Yeah, the mice they were tired of actually working, so they wanted to just take it easy and
I mean, they've been working a really long time.
And lead the good life, doing a tour circuit,
right.
doing speaking engagements and getting lots of money. So they wanted to take the money and run.
Yeah, but they had to have a good one, not a bad answer, because they gotta milk it for all it's worth. Right. So these two policemen began firing fire energy bolts on our intrepid heroes with their kill-o-zap guns, which is an even worse name than Dumbledore's put-outer.
Yeah.
It's kill-o-zap. Huh. But they take cover behind this big computer, and Ford tries reasoning with the cops, but they're like, we're like super liberal and sensitive and friendly. This is just our job. And it's like, bullshit, my dudes. You're still part of the systemic problems of law enforcement. Fuck off. They continue firing, and the computer bank is like starting to melt further and further away. But suddenly there's silence and two thuds. So Ford is like, okay, I'll have a look, even though he tries to get the others to talk him out of it. But he stands up and he sees these two dead bodies. And like they had like these tiny life support system computers on their backpacks that blew up, but they don't know how. So Zaphod grabs one of the kill-o-zap guns and blasts open into the corridor. And he almost hits Gandalf Ted Danson's air car, which is waiting for them, with a note pinned to the instrument panel saying, "This one's probably the best button to push." And the air car flies through the corridors and out into the open, onto the planet, and to the Heart of Gold. There's this other spaceship there, which was the cops. But it looks just as dead and silent as the rest of the planet. And Ford's like shocked at how a ship and two policemen could go spontaneously dead. And he sees Marvin. Remember him? Our depressed robot buddy? Lying there in the dust, and he asks how he is. And Marvin says, well, I'm depressed and I'm lying here in the dirt to be wretched. Anyone I talk to begins to hate me, it seems. And he points to the ship and says, it hated me. And Ford's like, what do you mean, my dude? And Marvin's like, I plugged myself into the computer and I told it my view of the universe, and it committed suicide. It's fucking horrible. I really, really hate that, because it's like, hey, don't share your completely valid feelings with those around you, or you'll ruin the other person's life and they may kill themselves. Fuck off with that, Douglas.
It reminds me of the movie Airplane, where he kept trying to tell his story to different people, and everybody he sat next to would commit suicide.
It's really unhealthy. I mean, I guess, was that just like a way of thinking in the 70s?
I guess. Yeah.
So the Heart of Gold zooms away from the Horsehead Nebula. Zaphod drinks a shit ton while Ford and Trillian talk, and Arthur takes a Hitchhiker's Guide to go read, figuring he may as well do it now that space and the galaxy is his home. The intercom buzzes, and Zaphod's like, hey kid, are you hungry? Arthur's like, yeah, I'm a bit peckish. And Zaphod says, cool, we're going to head to the restaurant at the end of the universe, which is the name of book 2 in the badly named trilogy.
Yeah. Increasingly inappropriately named trilogy.
Right. Okay, well, I was going to bring up the movie here, but we already pretty much did that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're going to have to get drunk and watch it, though, for Jessica's party.
Yeah, I guess. Have it on in the background or something.
Yeah. Or also, we can find the scripts to the stage plays.
Oh.
Because that's a thing. Did you know?
I did not know that.
Yep. So Neil Gaiman wrote a book about...
he wrote many books.
What?
He wrote Doctor Who.
He wrote some episodes of Doctor Who. Mm-hmm. Anyways, he wrote this one particular book about Douglas Adams and the Hitchhiker's Guide called Don't Panic. Which, I know, okay. Right. Anyways, this one Gizmodo article, it has these full chapters, one on the stage play and one on the movie, which are really interesting, and I'll put the link to this in the show notes. It's really interesting, but anyways, so he tells us that there have been 3 major productions of Hitchhikers. 2 have been successful, and the other was a disaster of epic proportions, which kind of goes along with the whole Hitchhikers thing. So the first production was put on by the Institute of Contemporary Arts in 79. This was before the book came out. This is just going off of the radio shows, which were before the book. Okay. Actually, yeah. So what they did was the actors performed on little ledges and platforms. This is real. While the audience, seated on a scaffolded auditorium that floated around on air skates filled with compressed air, was pushed around the hall at the height of 1/2000th of an inch by hardworking stagehands. Okay. That was a thing that happened. Okay. So this 90-minute show was a great success. This was only built for 80 people. It was like unbelievably popular. Like every hour brought 150 phone calls for tickets. Only like 640 tickets had been, like for the entire run. And They sold out like long before it opened. They got great reviews. And then they hoped that they were going to revive it as soon as they could find a hall large enough to accommodate a 500-seater hovercraft. Obviously, that didn't happen, unfortunately. One that happened in 1980 in Wales is theater. It's Welsh. I don't know how to say it. It's CLWYD, a Welsh theater company. Okay. I want to say Theater Cloud. So the director took scripts of the first radio series and turned them into a play. And apparently this is like the best one. So I'm going to try and look up that one and see if we can find it. But the third one, Douglas had offered the stage rights to Ken Campbell, who decided to stage this one production in a rock venue that seats 3,000 people. Douglas said, "I should have known better, but I had so many problems to contend with at that time. I really wasn't thinking clearly." Clwyd. Theater Clwyd. Okay. I won't remember that either.
Clwyd. Okay.
The thing at the Rainbow was a fiasco. So it had like a really huge budget, like £300,000, because it was going to be like a rock show, basically. The Daily Mail said, "I cannot imagine a more tedious way to spend an evening." Time Out said, "clumsy without ever being cheerful." The Observer said, "embarrassing." And the Standard said, "never ending and extremely boring." So it was really long, for one thing. The acting was horrible, apparently. And like the laser beams and sound effects and backing band were all terrible as well. Apparently. So Adams said that the size of the Rainbow, a 3,000-seat theater, and because Hitchhikers tends to be rather slow moving, and what is important is all the detail on the way, you put it in something that size, and the first thing that goes out of the window is all the detail. So you then fill it up with earthquake effects and lasers and things, and that further swamps out the detail. So everything was constantly being pushed in the wrong direction. All the poor actors were stuck on stage trying desperately to get noticed by the audience across this vast difference. If you'd put the numbers we were getting into a West End theater, they would have had terrific audiences, 700 a night or whatever. But 700 people isn't much when the producers are paying for 3,000 seats. So the whole thing was a financial disaster.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds amazing. I came across this one article that said, "Hey, we have this amazing footage of that production of it."
Okay.
But I clicked on the videos and the BBC had taken them down. I was so bummed.
Yeah.
So what are you reading?
finished Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey, which is the Expanse series. And there's I think it's the Science Channel that did it. I don't really remember. A TV series that's Expanse. Very, very impressed by the TV show. Mm-hmm. And so
it's on Prime. I know that.
Listen to the book, and they did such a good job in the TV show. There was very little that was different from in the book.
Mm-hmm. That's impressive.
Just a few minor things that was a little bit different. Mm-hmm. But the show hit basically every major point that was in the book, and I was very impressed. So I'll continue reading those. I've started the catalog of shipwrecked books, which is so we all know that Christopher Columbus was a
horrible person.
Yeah, was a genocidal slaving rapist. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But one good thing he did, he had a son that wasn't his legitimate son, but he was actually recognized by, after the stuff that Christopher Columbus did, his son went to work in the palace, whatever it was that Spain had, as an entourage of the prince of Spain, who it talks about he was dumb-witted, had no drive to do anything. Anyway, but his son grew up in this household where everything was cataloged, and everything you basically had. There was so much sorting in this house, to the point that they had a catalog that showed all the things that you could put in the house as decoration, and the things that you couldn't. Like you couldn't put certain paintings in a royal's room because it would symbolize something. And so they had to find ways of cataloging all this stuff. Well, as he's growing up in this environment, he's also trying to collect himself. As he becomes an adult, he starts collecting books, and he basically wants to make a library of everything that's ever been written. And he starts cataloging. He starts getting pamphlets and books, and as before, any library that was known at the time, most libraries had like a few dozen books, and then there was some that would have a few hundred books. And his library that he created had over 4,000 books.
Holy shit! And
his is the first known library that actually stood books up.
Oh.
And not just piled them on tables and had stacks. So that they were talking about how that was strange. And then he was finding ways of cataloging those books because
everything was cataloged.
Because he had so many that there was no person that could remember everything and where everything was. Sure. So he was starting to come up with his own method of cataloging them all. So anyway, it's interesting.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. Yeah. I'm reading the third book in this Harry Potter series. And man, things are getting intense. So Harry's back for his... Were you just looking at my socks and what I'm wearing?
No.
You know what? Don't pay attention that I'm wearing Harry Potter socks in a sweatshirt. Shut up. It's totally brand new to me series. So Harry's back for his third year at Hogwarts, the magic school. So there's like this escaped criminal named Sirius Black. And he like blew up 14 muggles before he was sent
to
muggle? Oh, it's a non-magic person. Yeah, because the magic people have to like hide and stuff.
Gotcha.
Yeah. From the muggles. So he was sent to this really scary sounding prison called Azkaban, but he broke out of it, and now it looks like he's after Harry. We don't know why. Scary Harry. Scary for Harry. Anyways, it's really good.
It sounds intriguing. I might have to read it one day.
One day in 20 years. Next week, we're going to read, I have never heard of this. So we'll see if I like it. Called The Stainless Steel Rat by Harry Harrison. That's got to be a fake name, right?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, this was a very
it is
fun and influential book for me of an alternative view of societal agreements, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And I'm interested to know because, okay, so obviously Hitchhiker's Guide didn't stand up quite as good as I had remembered it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm interested to see how this one is because it's been easily 25 years or more since I've read it. So,
cool.
Yeah. We're rereading the books of our youth.
So you don't have to. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.